Aku anak Malaysia, ku bangga, tanah tumpahnya darah.
Good afternoon and Salam Malaysia Madani. You're watching World Today with me, Mohana Priya. Before we begin our bulletin, here's a quick look at today's top stories. Indonesian President Prabowo Subianto met with Jordan's King Abdullah II in Amman to discuss Gaza Board of Peace plan. Indonesia reaffirmed support for two-state solution in the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. Indonesia is part of Trump's Board of Peace and will contribute troops to maintain peace in Gaza when the plan is implemented. Iran says a deal could be reached with the US as both sides prepare for a third round of nuclear talks. Iran expressed readiness to provide concessions but insisted that they are not willing to give up peaceful nuclear usage rights. The new round of nuclear talks will be a platform on which the West Asian country aims to clear up misunderstandings which arose in the past meetings. At least 18 people were killed in a Myanmar military airstrike on a village market. 4 or 5 buildings were burnt down and many others were destroyed. Western Myanmar has been under control of the Arakan army, making it the target of constant airstrikes and blockades by the junta. Clashes between ethnic armed groups and Myanmar's military have intensified since a February 2021 coup. South Korea, along with the US, have agreed to conduct major military drills known as Freedom Shield next month. Both countries insist the exercise, conducted annually, is defensive in nature. However, it is heavily condemned by North Korea, which claims it is a rehearsal for invasion. South Korean efforts to improve strained ties with the North have not succeeded thus far. A speedboat from Florida entered Cuban waters and engaged in a gunfight with Cuban forces. Cuba's Interior Ministry said that 4 aboard the Florida-based speedboat were killed, while another 6 were injured. The incident took place amid heightened tension between Cuba and the US, which has blocked all oil shipments into Cuba. China welcomes German enterprises to continue investing in China and actively engage in economic and trade cooperation. It said Germany is an important economic and trade partner with solid foundations and significant potential. China is advancing its high-level opening up continuously to promote high-quality economic development. Barcelona has approved a plan to double the city's tourism tax beginning April. This means that tourists visiting Barcelona could soon pay one of the highest tourism taxes in Europe. City officials say the move is aimed at reducing overcrowding and helping fund affordable housing. The measure has drawn mixed reactions from both locals and tourists. Aston Martin announced that it will cut another 20% of its workforce. The decision came after the luxury car maker's annual profit came in worse than expected amid weak demand and tariff pressures. Aston Martin is grappling with what it described as a brutal year as it endures hits from US tariffs and low demand in the China market. The job losses mostly affect positions in the United Kingdom. Pro-Palestinian activists say a new flotilla is preparing to sail to Gaza with over 100 boats to depart from Spain and more joining from Mediterranean ports. Organizers made the announcement at a press conference in Istanbul. The vessels will carry medical professionals, educators and aid supplies in an attempt once again to peacefully break Israel's blockade of Gaza. Paris Saint-Germain survives a late scare against Monaco to draw 2-2, winning on aggregate 5-3 to reach the UEFA Champions League last 16. It was a familiar scenario for the defending European champions in their first leg encounter, where they came from a 2-goal deficit and turned it into a 3-2 victory. They will next face either Barcelona or Chelsea as their possible rivals on their way to the final. And that was today's top news in a quick snapshot. Up next, the complete World Today Bulletin, bringing you the quintessential details.
Padamkan komputer untuk lebih penjimatan.
You're watching World Today. King Abdullah II of Jordan on Wednesday welcomed Indonesian President Prabowo Subianto at Basman Palace in Amman. Speaking during a meeting between the two leaders, Prabowo expressed his support for a two-state solution in the Israeli-Palestinian conflict.
We are deeply concerned about the problems in the West Bank. We feel that this could affect the success of whatever we try to do in Gaza. So we would like to strengthen and enhance this cooperation, and I think my team will work closely with your team, and so that we are always on top of the situation. We know exactly what's going to happen.
He also said Indonesia fully supports US President Donald Trump's plan to end the Gaza war, all with the view and effort to do whatever possible to achieve that lasting solution. Indonesia is part of Trump's Board of Peace that held its debut meeting earlier in February. Prabowo had announced his country would contribute up to 8,000 troops to an international stabilization force that will help keep the peace in Gaza when it eventually deploys. Iran's Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi said an equitable deal could be reached with the United States as both sides prepare for a third round of nuclear talks in Geneva. Abbas Araghchi indicated that Iran is ready to provide concessions, but reiterated that the country is not ready to give up its right for peaceful use of the technology.
We are ready to answer questions. We are ready to remove concerns. But we are not ready to give up our right for peaceful use of nuclear technology. This is what we demand. There is every possibility to come to an agreed solution which is fair and balanced.
The Iranian foreign minister heads to Geneva for the third round of nuclear talks with the US. He added that the new round of talks will be pillared on the understandings forged in the previous rounds in Muscat and Geneva. According to experts, Thursday's round of talks will be decisive and will determine the future course of diplomacy between the two countries. New Zealand has imposed sanctions on Iran over its violent crackdown on anti-government protests. It announced travel bans on 40 Iranian officials accused of serious human rights abuses. Those sanctioned include Iran's Interior Minister, Intelligence Minister, the Prosecutor General and members of the Islamic Revolutionary Guards Corps. Foreign Minister Winston Peters described the killings of protesters as horrifying and said New Zealand is joining Australia, Britain, Canada and the EU and the US in taking action. Iran's embassy in Wellington rejected the move, calling the sanctions politically motivated and based on misinformation. The travel bans mark Wellington's latest step in aligning with Western allies over Iran's human rights record. A Myanmar military airstrike on a village market in the country's westernmost state killed at least 17 people. Myanmar has been consumed by civil war since the military staged a coup 5 years ago, provoking armed resistance from democracy activists and ethnic minority factions that have long held sway in the nation's fringes. The western coastal state of Rakhine is among the worst-hit regions. Controlled almost entirely by the ethnic minority Arakan army, it has been blockaded by the junta and pummeled with regular airstrikes. Chairman of the Ponangyun Youth Association said that their list shows 18 confirmed deaths, including 3 children and 16 people injured. Arriving at the scene after the strike, he described its aftermath as really bad. He said that 4 or 5 buildings were burnt down and many others were destroyed. Clashes between ethnic armed groups and Myanmar's military have intensified since the February 2021 coup that ousted the elected government led by Aung San Suu Kyi's National League of Democracy. South Korea and the US will conduct major joint military drills known as Freedom Shield from 9th till 19th March. Military officials from the countries said on Wednesday that the annual exercise is defensive in nature, though the designation has not prevented it from being a frequent flashpoint with North Korea, which has long denounced the drills as a rehearsal for invasion. The exercise will also serve as an opportunity to support ongoing preparations for the transfer of U.S. wartime operational control to South Korea. Past drills, including last year's iteration, featured multi-domain and command post training aimed at supporting this readiness. South Korea aims to complete the handover of military command from the U.S. before President Lee Jae-myung's term ends in 2030. South Korean and U.S. officials said the exercise by the allies next month would incorporate deterrence scenarios related to North Korea's nuclear weapons. President Lee has sought to improve strained ties with North Korea, though those efforts have so far been rebuffed by Pyongyang. South Korean media previously reported that Seoul had proposed scaling back field training exercises during Freedom Shield to support this outreach, but that it was met with U.S. resistance. 4 people were killed and 7 others were wounded after a speedboat from Florida entered Cuban waters and opened fire on Cuban forces, who returned fire. Cuba's Interior Ministry said that all 4 dead were aboard the Florida-based speedboat and another 6 were injured. In addition, the Cuban commander of Border Patrol boat was wounded. The wounded foreign attackers were evacuated and received medical attention. The incident took place amid heightened tension between Cuba and the U.S., which has blocked virtually all oil shipments from the island, increasing pressure on the communist-run government. U.S. President J.D. Vance said that the Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, had briefed him on the incident.
But we don't know a whole lot of details, and so I'll defer to the White House to provide more updates as we get them. Certainly, a situation that we're monitoring. Hopefully, it's not as bad as we fear it could be, but can't say more because I just don't know more.
Israeli settlers set fire to vehicles and tents in the village of Setia in the latest incidents of violence against Palestinians in the occupied West Bank. Verified video shows a group of men entering the village before fires broke out. A resident told Reuters that the attacks happen frequently because the village is near a main road.
اتفاجأنا في مستوطنين يمكن حوالي 30 مستوطن. اجوا حرقوا الخيمه هذا معهم ماده حارقه حرقوا الخيمه هذا وحرقوا الخيمه هذا حرقوا خم الجيت ما خلوش ولا شيء جنابي حرمي عفش كله حرقوه.
The Israeli military said troops were deployed and an investigation into what it called deliberate burnings of Palestinian property has been opened. The UN says settler violence has surged since the Gaza war began in October 2023. UN data shows that more than 800 Palestinians have been displaced by settler attacks in 2026 alone. The latest incident adds to growing international concern over escalating tensions in the West Bank. A record 129 journalists and media workers were killed in the course of their work last year, 2/3 of them killed by Israel. The Committee to Protect Journalists, or CPJ, said 86 journalists were killed by Israel, most of them Palestinians in Gaza. 31 others died in a strike on a Houthi media center in Yemen, one of the deadliest attacks on journalists ever documented. The New York-based group said Israel accounted for 81% of killings it classified as deliberate murders. It added that the real figure could be higher due to limited access to Gaza. Outside Gaza and Yemen, the deadliest countries included Sudan, Mexico, Ukraine, and the Philippines. The CPJ said that the scale of killings marks the most dangerous period for journalists since it began tracking press freedom more than 30 years ago. Next, China welcomes German investors to engage in economic and trade cooperation. German enterprises are welcome to continue investing in China and actively engage in China-Germany economic and trade cooperation. In Beijing, Vice Premier He Lifeng held talks with the German economic delegation accompanying Chancellor Friedrich Merz during his official visit to China. Chinese Vice Premier said that China and Germany are important economic and trade partners with solid foundations, significant potential and strong complementary in their bilateral economic and trade cooperation. China is advancing its high-level opening up continuously to promote high-quality economic development, providing broad space and opportunities for China-Germany economic growth. Relevant enterprises represented in the German delegation expressed confidence in China's economic development prospects. They also conveyed their willingness to expand investment in China and share in the development opportunities created by Chinese modernization. Now, tourists visiting Barcelona could soon pay one of the highest tourism taxes in Europe. Catalonia's regional parliament has approved a plan to double the city's tourist tax starting April. Hotel guests in Barcelona could now pay between 10 and 15 euros per night, up from the current 5 to 7.5 euros, depending on the hotel category. Visitors staying in five-star hotels may be charged up to 15 euros a night. City officials say the move is aimed at reducing overcrowding and helping fund affordable housing. The measure drew mixed reactions from tourists near the Sagrada Familia.
Will definitely help local people, and I fully agree with this taxation because it makes all the sense in the world because Barcelona is overcrowded. I think you should raise the taxes to a decent level so you can use the money to get buildings and houses for those who need it.
No, non credo che ritornerò se dovessi pagare 15 euro perché comunque le spese del viaggio non sono state molto economiche e quindi non trovo giusto queste ulteriori spese perché comunque noi gli portiamo comunque un guadagno noi turisti andando nei locali, visitando i loro monumenti, eccetera.
Authorities say growing tourism has pushed up rents, partly due to short-term holiday rentals. Barcelona has already announced plans to ban all short-term rentals by 2028. Now, before the increase, the city ranked 11th in Europe for tourist taxes, behind Amsterdam, which currently tops the list. Aston Martin said on Wednesday that it will cut another 20% of its workforce after the luxury car maker's annual profit came in worse than expected amid weak demand and tariff pressures. Now, the second round of job cuts confirm a brutal year for Aston Martin, which had been hit by a U.S. quota-based tariff system it described as extremely disruptive, alongside extremely subdued demand in its key Chinese market. The job losses total around 600, with Aston Martin employing some 3,000 people, mostly in the United Kingdom. Aston Martin limits imports to the US in April and May while awaiting a trade agreement between London and Washington. It resumed shipments in June after the deal slashed tariffs on UK car exports to 10% from 27.5% on a limit of 100,000 vehicles annually. The company's consistent struggle to generate cash and manage its £1.38 billion debt pile has continued to weigh on performance despite repeated capital injections. Best known as the car brand driven by James Bond, the luxury automaker said it expects further cash outflows in 2026, though it anticipates an improvement thereafter. Saudi Arabia's General Authority for the Care of the Two Holy Mosques continues to provide services to visitors of the Prophet's Mosque during Ramadan through service centers spread across its courtyards. These centers help create a spiritual atmosphere and enable worshippers to perform their rituals with ease and tranquility. According to Saudi press agency, the centers receive visitors upon their arrival at the courtyards of the Prophet's Mosque, offering a range of services that include religious and spatial guidance, multilingual communication support, and responding to inquiries. Assistance with nusuk services, wheelchair loans, guidance for lost individuals, requesting emergency medical services when needed, and providing safety wristbands for the elderly and children were also provided. The centers operate on both the southern and northern sides of the Prophet's Mosque. Pro-Palestinian activists say a new flotilla is preparing to sail to Gaza. More than 100 boats are set to depart from Spain on the 12th of April, with others joining from Mediterranean ports. Organisers made the announcement at a press conference in Istanbul. They say the vessels will carry medical professionals, educators and aid supplies in an attempt to break Israel's blockade of Gaza.
With the global Sumud flotilla that will be departing, inshallah, in April, we are also announcing 2 land convoys that will move towards the Gaza Strip and that will open not only a sea corridor but also a land humanitarian corridor that will start, inshallah, from the Maghreb region and also from a South Asian country.
The mission aims to draw attention to conditions in Gaza, where most of the population has been displaced during the war. Last October, Israeli forces intercepted a flotilla of around 40 boats heading to Gaza and detained more than 450 activists, including Swedish campaigner Greta Thunberg. Organizers say the latest flotilla will proceed despite the risks, calling it a humanitarian mission. Still to come in sports, Galatasaray knocks Juventus out of UEFA Champions League. Paris Saint-Germain came from behind and then survived a late scare against a 10-man Monaco, drawing 2-2 in the second leg of their Champions League knockout phase playoff tie on Wednesday to reach the last 16 with a 5-4 aggregate victory. Luis Enrique's team will now find out on Friday their potential opponents all the way to the final in Budapest, with Barcelona and Chelsea their possible rivals in the last 16. The defending European champions recovered from 2 behind to win 3-2 in the Principality in last week's first leg, a game in which Monaco had a man sent off early in the second half. The scenario this time was similar, with French international Magnus Akliuchi giving Monaco a deserved interval lead on the night to level the scores overall. However, the visitors had Mamadou Koulibaly sent off on 58 minutes, and that proved the catalyst for PSG to make it 1-1 through Mourinho's before Kivica Kvaratskhelia seemed to have clinched the aggregate triumph. Jordan Teze did make it 2-2 in stoppage time, and without Faiz then missed a great chance, but PSG held on to progress to the next round. Elsewhere, Juventus are out of the Champions League after a dramatic night against Galatasaray. The Italian side came close to a stunning comeback but were eliminated 7-5 on aggregate. Trailing 5-2 after last week's first leg in Istanbul, Juve needed a near miracle to reach the last 16. Goals from Manuel Locatelli, Federico Gatti and Weston McKennie forced extra time despite Juventus playing with 10 men. But Galatasaray struck back in extra time through Victor Osimhen and Baris Yilmaz to seal the tie. Galatasaray advanced to the next round, where they will face either Liverpool or Tottenham. And also through to the Champions League last 16 are Real Madrid after a tense night at the Santiago Bernabeu. Vinicius Jr. scored the decisive goal as Madrid beat Benfica 2-1, sealing a 3-1 aggregate victory. The tie came under the spotlight following allegations of racial abuse aimed at Vinicius in last week's first leg, claims denied by Benfica's Gianluca Prestiani. Benfica took an early lead through Rafa Silva, but Aurelien Tchouameni quickly equalized for the hosts. With the game finally balanced, Vinicius struck in the 80th minute, calmly finishing past goalkeeper Anatoly Trubin to send Madrid through. The 15-time European champions now move into the knockout stage, while attention remains on UEFA's investigation into the racism allegations. And that wraps up World Today this time round. Until next time, I'm Mohana Priya. Salam Malaysia Madani. Thank you for your company.